Hello and welcome to episode 220 of Stand Up. Joining me today, a conversation with our political analyst, Bill B. in D.C. about all the latest numbers and predictions on the election, and an amazing hour-long conversation with one of my all-time favorite human beings, CNN legal analyst, host of her own SiriusXM radio show, my friend Laura Coates. I'm Pete Dominick. It's time to stand up with me right now. Hello and hi and hola and other ways to open the show, the conversation, which is here 5 days a week. I interview the smartest people I can find about the most important issues that face you, your family, your community, your country, your culture, and your planet. And obviously, we've been pretty heavy in the politics in election year, in the first year of this podcast. But we've worked in all kinds of different guests, from parenting to science to dealing with anxiety and depression, especially when the show first began and I was a broken person this time last year. But thanks to your support and subscriptions to this podcast, it has given me a tremendous amount of hope and motivation that you would want to hear conversations like the ones I host every day and be involved with them as well. I hope that you'll join me on Friday night at 8 Eastern when I'll be hosting a Zoom hangout. And apparently more and more personalities like me, talk show hosts, media types, whatever you want to call this business, this game that we're in, are now creating Discord platforms and Zoom chats. We did it first, of course. Okay, maybe not first, but very excited to see you all on Friday night. And here's the fun part. It's a costume party. Yeah, I'm going to conquer one of my fears and liberate one of my truths. I've mentioned many times over the years that I don't like costume parties. I don't like dressing up in costumes and then having thoughtful conversations with people. It's weird to me. I don't know why I get social anxiety in that one main situation, but there's just something about being dressed up as a crayon talking to somebody who's dressed up as a sandwich, and I just can't stop. I can't take the conversation seriously. So I'm going to try to conquer that on Friday night. And the fun thing is you really don't have to get too elaborate with your costume. I mean, if you want to, you can, but it's just going to be, your face, your upper body. So I'm sure a lot of people do, hopefully, masks and makeup and wigs and lighting and backdrops. Maybe pick a great backdrop. Maybe I'll have special guests stop by with masks on and we'll have to guess them by their voice. That's a good idea. I'm just thinking of ideas in the moment. Anyway, if you are a subscriber to the show for as little as $5, then you can join us on Friday night at 8 p.m. And we welcome you, all new folks. Welcome to the community. Cool people on Discord, on Zoom, on chat, networking, getting to know each other. At some point, we'll have a big party, Swamp South, Florida. Looking forward to it, Brian Mitchell. I hope to see you there, and we'll see if we get some good guests. But either way, we'll have a great conversation and a bit of a distraction from the chaos, all of the chaos that is COVID, and 5 days away from Election Day after 4 years of a nightmare. So Friday night, 8 o'clock, sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominick, or just go to the paid subscription link in the show notes if you haven't already. That's going to be a really fun time. Halloween hangout, Friday at 8 p.m. So how are you doing? I mean, we're just 5 days away. A lot of people are struggling with the time between now and Election Day because we feel so much is at stake. Between the most, I think, urgent existential threat, which is the virus, and maybe the less urgent but not equally as important issues around racism and opportunity and healthcare and climate and guns and democracy, whatever you care about. It's all hinging on Tuesday night, and it's really important that we try to take care of our mental health in the meantime, but that's increasingly hard. One thing I did that was helpful, and I don't know if it was distracting because it was pretty on point, but as I voted on Tuesday. I early voted. I waited in line. Dan McDonald, listener, subscriber, friend, texted me in the morning. He's like, dude, vote date. And Dan and I stood in the rain for almost 2 hours, hour and a half, almost 2 hours, and went up there and voted and was excited to write in a candidate. I did not actually vote for Joe Biden. I wrote in Aaron Carroll because my vote doesn't matter in New York. So I wrote in. I'm kidding. I voted for Biden. And I was excited also to, I guess it's mark the dot next to Mondaire Jones's name. He would be the first openly gay black man in the House. Mondaire's a really smart guy. Interviewed him as well back in show 33. So it felt good to cast my vote, get my sticker, and play my role in democracy. I look forward to hearing your voting stories as well. The lady thought Dan and I were together. Are you guys together? No. You can do better than him. Come on. We had fun with that. All right. So there's a few things I want to play for you, and I'll then bring you the conversations that I've got today. Bill B. and DC and I had a fun chat and a wide-ranging, amazing conversation with Laura Coates, who just absolutely blows my mind every time I see her on TV, hear her on the radio, and certainly have a conversation with her myself. And today is no exception. That is for sure. All right, I want to start, though, with Miles Taylor, and then we'll build up to maybe some more important stories. But you probably remember the guy who wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, and then subsequently wrote a book also by Anonymous. Well, the author of that 2018 book has come out publicly now, and his name is Miles Taylor. He was the chief of staff to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. And he wrote a lengthy statement explaining why he penned a 2018 op-ed declaring he was part of the, quote, resistance inside the Trump administration. And a lot has been made of this today because it prompted yawns and outrage based on his role in family separation is where the outrage came. And all you need to know about this guy, Miles Taylor, who is no longer in the administration, is the reporting from NBC News' Jacob Soboroff, who says Miles Taylor was a critical part of the team that decided to separate thousands of migrant kids from their parents, resulting in lifelong psychological trauma. He would like you to believe otherwise. Now, here's this douchebag, Miles Taylor, on CNN, where he is now a paid contributor, and my friend Wajahat Ali isn't, which is another injustice. Don't get me started. Here's Miles Taylor back in August with Anderson Cooper when Anderson Cooper straight up asked him if he was anonymous.
There was an op-ed, there was a book by someone calling themselves Anonymous. Are you aware of who that is?
I'm not. Look, and that was a parlor game that happened in Washington, D.C. of a lot of folks trying to think of who that might be. I've got my own thoughts about who that might be, but, I want my focus to be on the president, and I certainly don't want to. I wear a mask for two things, Anderson, Halloweens and pandemics, so no.
You said that more former administration officials would be joining.
All right. Thank you, Miles Taylor. That's just about enough from your 15 minutes. Really, Chris Cuomo took him to task on his show last night and basically said, you're a liar. Why should we keep you on the payroll on CNN, which I give him my respect for Cuomo on that one. Here's some quick Twitter reaction to this asshole coming out announcing that he's anonymous after he made money on a book. Brian Kober, Miles Taylor is already getting too much media attention. Yawn. Josh Hammer on Twitter. Who is Miles Taylor? And so does this make any difference to anything? Well, he's also a contributor at CNN. Maybe they should not have him as a contributor based on his role in child separation. What do you think? Too much to ask? All right. Now I want to talk to you about President Trump in Arizona briefly. Well, first of all, President Trump was in Nebraska 2 nights ago, and what he does is he flies in to different airports and has rallies like right outside Air Force One as a backdrop, which is arguably an ethics violation, using official government property like the White House and Air Force One for campaign purposes. But he stands nobly. I mean, he can't stand nobly. He stands grossly. He stands grossly in front of Air Force One, gives a speech at the airport, at the hangar, and then gets back on Air Force One and leaves and goes on to the next location or to home. And that's not unprecedented, but that's basically all he's been doing. And in Nebraska the other night, in Omaha, several Trump supporters were hospitalized after they were stranded in the freezing cold at Trump's rally. So now there's three different ways that Trump is trying to kill you. He's trying to take away your health care. He's trying to tell you that COVID is not a real thing and don't wear a mask. So he's misinforming you. So maybe four things. Then he's actually spreading the virus by breathing on people himself when he had it, as well as, more importantly, holding these rallies. No artists, no musicians, no comedians. Nobody's having audiences of people join them. But that's what he's doing. And so he's spreading the virus. So that's the third way. And the final way is now people are freezing to death at his rallies because there were not enough buses to take them back to their cars in the long-term parking lot and the Omaha airport. Here is comedian Blair Erskine, who made this video and shared it under social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram, doing her impression of a Trump supporter at the rally in Omaha, saying Trump wanted to teach them a lesson. Here she is.
I'm having a great time. I can't feel my body, but I don't really need my body. This is about Trump's body. I think this whole thing's been blown way out of proportion, you know? Like, yeah, they didn't let us drive our cars here, but it's because they said, you know, our cars are poor, and that doesn't look good on TV. You know, you're a TV person, you know that. I think he did this to teach us a lesson. I really do. What was that lesson? Well, that's not really for me to know. And that's actually pretty nasty of you to ask. Democrats want to have their bus rides and have their bus rides back, too. This isn't the Polar Express. Tom Hanks isn't in charge of this thing. He's in Greece being a pedophile.
Oh, dear.
No, I don't feel like he abandoned us. No. Listen, I would walk 750 miles in below zero temperatures, nip nude, just to hear him speak. Maybe that's not appropriate to say, but yes, I've seen some elderly people passed out and unresponsive. But to be honest, the only reason there's so many of those people is because the media keeps counting them. And so if people like you guys weren't counting the old people that were on the ground, there wouldn't be as many.
Yeah, very funny. Blair Erskine's got a huge following on Twitter, like 211,000 followers, and on Instagram as well. All right, check her out, and I'll try to get her on. She sounds great. So, yeah, President Trump went to Arizona where he did a couple of campaign rallies. Apparently, an aircraft entered restricted airspace over one of the rallies, and it led to an F-16 scrambling to intercept it. And I guess it, sent out some flares or something. Anyway, that's a little weird and scary. But even scarier than that is that Arizona is seeing increasing numbers of coronaviruses per day, according to data from Johns Hopkins. And yet he's having these rallies there. And apparently many of the rally goers, according to CNN, on Wednesday were seen wearing masks, but not socially distancing. So we'll see what happens in Arizona. But Martha Mcsally is the Republican senator there. She is losing in her Senate race to Captain Mark Kelly, who you should donate to maybe. And she was at the rally, and Trump does not like Martha Mcsally. I found out after hearing this because I looked into it a little bit because it was just listen to him introduce her. She's a United States senator from Arizona. She's also one of the first female, maybe the first female combat veteran. She flew the A-10 Warthog in Iraq and I think Afghanistan. And he doesn't like, the military. He thinks she's a sucker and a loser. And she's a strong woman. She's a fighter jet pilot. This is how he tries to get her on stage.
Martha, come up just fast. Quick. Fast. Fast. Come on, quick. You got 1 minute. 1 minute, Martha's sake. They don't want to hear this, Martha. Come on, let's go. Quick. Come on, let's go.
All right. I'm coming. Thank you, President.
There she is. She gets 1 minute. 1 minute to talk to the people because this dirtbag of a talk show host and scoundrel and mafia loser, traitor to America, to his people, to everything that is sacred in anybody's life, this monster that she needs his approval. Ugh, so gross. But he hates her. And Aaron Rupar over at Vox had been tweeting about it, putting some context to their relationship. And here is Trump at some kind of a ceremony. I don't know where this was, but he was asked about the politics of Arizona and how that looked for him. And here's his answer.
I think so. I think I saw a poll that was very good for me. I think we have to make sure Martha's going to do. I think Martha's going to do good.
What? Oh, did you hear that? Martha's going to do good. Oh, yeah.
But we have some states that are going to be not easy. But Arizona's been great. And we're stopping illegal aliens from...
All right, I've heard enough. You're not stopping anything. And soon you're going to be stopped. Yes, just days away. It's going to happen. It has to happen. All right, and finally here on this Martha Mcsally thing, this is probably the most, I don't know, the craziest moment, weirdest moment, most awkward moment of any of the debates. I watch a lot of like Senate debates and congressional debates. Here she is debating Captain Mark Kelly, and the moderator asked, well, here it is.
Here. Senator, the question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President Trump?
Putting legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support for President Trump.
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona over here.
All right, so maybe that's why Trump was being such a dick to her, huh? Because she couldn't say that she was proud of her support for Donald Trump at an Arizona debate. Hoping she loses. All right, here is Senate Minority Leader from California. And I interviewed his opponent, and I really hope that she wins as well. Her name is Kim Mangone for Congress. Look out for her race out there in California as well. Anyway, Kevin McCarthy was at this rally, and he said a really weird thing that you're going to hear right now. It's really weird. Listen very closely.
It'll be before we swear in the president again. But the reason why I want you to come, I want you to watch Nancy Pelosi hand me that gavel.
Okay. Come to Washington and let him be the speaker, and they get to watch that, give power back to Republicans.
And I promise you this. I won't bang her with it, but I'll bang the end to the socialism and yes to America.
I won't bang her with it, is what he said. And yes, a lot of people noticed that it wasn't just me. Twitter blew up when that was shared. That guy's real dumb and a real asshole. Kevin McCarthy. Go vote for and support his opponent out there in California, Kim Mangone. She's great. Former veteran herself. I interviewed her back in episode 120. You can go back and look it up anytime. All the archives are linked to the show every day. All right, so here is President Trump saying some super, super weird shit. You always think, this was my tweet around this video when I watched it. I wrote, what's really consistent is how often you'll say to yourself, nah, he didn't say that. And then you watch it, and it's actually far worse than it was even described. That's how I felt about this clip that I saw of the president speaking in Arizona on Wednesday.
With Sleepy Joe, there'd be no graduations, no weddings, no Thanksgiving. They're already talking about no Thanksgiving.
Right.
And in California, you have a special mask. You cannot, under any circumstances, take it off. You have to eat through the mask.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? Right, Charlie? It's a very complex mechanism.
Just
and
riffing.
They don't realize those germs, they go through it like nothing.
They go through it like...
They look at you with that contraption and they say, that's an easy one. I'll go right through with the food.
He's now saying the masks don't work. That's what he's saying. He's saying that they don't work.
Now, how about California, though, where you're supposed to eat with the mask? Can't take it off.
What is he talking?
You see people? And boy, you know, when you have spaghetti and meat sauce, that mask is not looking You walk out, it looks like you got into a fight with Dana White. Where's Dana?
Oh, where's Dana White?
You fought one of Dana White. I saw Dana White. Does anybody know who Dana White is?
The head of the UFC.
Looks like you got into a fight with one of his fighters, right? No. You don't have Christmas. You don't have the 4th of July. No. We got to get back to normal, but you got to open up the states. By the way, just so you know, on November 4th, they'll announce your state is open.
No, they won't.
And on November 4th, all of a sudden, the COVID, you turn on television, we have great numbers. We have some incredible
What
numbers.
are you talking?
Mortality is way down.
What are you? He's just saying shit. He's not even able to finish a thought. He's not able to finish a thought. But you know who is the next senator of Georgia, Jon Ossoff? Earlier, I played you a horrible moment from the Arizona Senate debate. This is an amazing moment from the Georgia Senate debate where Jon Ossoff is taking on David Perdue. And the audio doesn't really do it justice. You got to see the actual video of this. But here is Jon Ossoff absolutely confronting David Perdue and his horrific morality and I think pretty clear crimes.
Well, perhaps Senator Perdue would have been able to respond properly to the COVID-19 pandemic if you hadn't been fending off multiple federal investigations for insider trading. It's not just that you're a crook, Senator. It's that you're attacking the health of the people that you represent. You did say COVID-19 was no deadlier than the flu. You did say there would be no significant uptick in cases. All the while, you were looking after your own assets and your own portfolio, and you did vote 4 times to end protections for pre-existing conditions. 4 times. And the legislation that you tout, the PROTECT Act, it includes loopholes that specifically allow insurance companies to deny policies to Georgians with pre-existing conditions. Can you look down the camera and tell the people of this state why you voted 4 times to allow insurance companies to deny us health coverage because we may suffer from diabetes or heart disease or asthma or have cancer in remission? Why, Senator?
Jon Ossoff absolutely tearing into Senator David Perdue, who, he's totally got caught and is being investigated for insider trading. He bought stock in a company that produces PPE, personal protective equipment, on January 24th, which was the same day the Senate received a classified briefing on the spread of coronavirus. Great work by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. How is he even still in the race? All right, that is a news and audio roundup for you here. I'll do that at the beginning of every show. If you like it, great. If you don't, you can just fast forward to the interviews. No harm, no foul. I want to try to give you as much good content as I can every day to help you learn and get enlightened along with me. I'm just part of the classroom, bringing these great guests on the show. Longtime listener, Bill B. in D.C., regular guest now on the show. Great political analyst, always including a historical perspective, and it's analysis. It's not facts. It's just thoughts on things. And we had a great back and forth talking about where we're at right now with 6 days before Election Day. I don't know when you're listening to this podcast. And I always love talking to Bill. He's a businessman in Washington, D.C., very well connected, super smart, well-read guy, and great on the air. Also a great follow on Twitter, at Bill B in D.C. Here it is.
Mr. Dominic.
There he is, the Stand Up with Pete Dominic, resident political analyst and pundit. Bill B in D.C.
Excellent.
I wanted to ask you, with 6 days to go before the election, what you think of, number one, the fact that a record number of people have voted at this point. At least 71 million people have already voted compared to 139 total ballots cast 4 years ago. What does that say to you?
Actually, the number is up to, I believe, 75 million.
Wow.
So it's changed
Thank you for the update.
that much. Yeah, just in the last, 4 hours. But I think it's hugely important that is happening because it addresses the big fear that it looks like we have every right to be worried about ballots being invalidated if they come in late or if there's, some reasonable way to invalidate them, quote unquote, reasonable way by the Supreme Court. So I think as happened in 2008, the concerns about voter suppression and Supreme Court action that would destroy ballots has really led people to vote intensely. COVID obviously is part of that. But it really feels like the vote's pouring in. And the reality is that the more people vote, the better it is for Democrats, almost universally. So it makes me feel good. It's a good thing. And I think it's all down to the fantastic abilities of Donald Trump to get people out to try to destroy him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to fear motivates voters, and the right and Republicans have always been really good at creating and manufacturing fear with words like socialism and you're going to raise your taxes and things like that. But authentic fear is a virus that is out of control after however many months we've been in this situation. That's real fear. And it seems like that is motivating everybody. I don't want to say Democrats or liberals. I think everybody is voting on COVID.
Yeah, but, it is really beneficial for Democrats. I mean, if you look at a place like Texas, where Texas has every chance of going Democratic this time, which I would have imagined would have been 10 years from now. But, the people coming out in Texas, it's looking like a hell of a lot of Democrats and independents. And so I think that, yes, it's good that everybody's coming out to vote. But I mean, there's data out there that Republicans are going to more vote on election day than Democrats by a significant amount.
Well, it's going to be interesting because they're going to have those poll watchers with their guns to intimidate people. But the only people that are going to be left voting are Republicans.
Yeah, I was telling people today that if you had to be concerned that people were going to have guns at the voting site, can you possibly think of a bigger reason to go out and vote?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. So, I mean, who are you looking at? Like, what data are you looking at, and how would you explain to people how to analyze this if they want to over the next 5 days? Where to go, in the morning or at night, and how to understand it, or not at all?
I would say that rule number one: don't watch too damn much of this stuff. So I like to check 538, their thing in the morning. I look at The Economist. They have a presidential model. I look at those two. They're slightly different models. The Economist is more aggressive than 538, but they're both basically hardcore statistical modeling based upon reasonable interpretations of past voting. Other than that, I look at anything written by Amy Walter, Charlie Cook, or David Wasserman, who's at Redistrict on Twitter. They are small c conservative, careful pundits who have been around for a billion years. I've met Charlie Cook. He's an amazing guy. And they're the people.
I know Amy Walter very well, and her husband, her wife, Kathy, I know them really well. They're great people. Go ahead, since we're talking about them being good people. Yeah.
They're good people, and they are really serious analysts. They're the kind of analysts that both Republicans and Democrats in Washington read because you can trust them to look at things the right way. And what they are now saying, particularly David Wasserman's almost scoffing at Trump's chances at this point. Because what they see is the polling that is done on a district level, right? And so by district, I mean that, you're looking at the 3rd congressional district in Pennsylvania, for example. They're seeing the polling that campaigns do just for that district, because the RNC, the DNC, the various committees, the PACs, et cetera, they all do that polling so that they know where to spend their money.
Right.
Now, Wasserman is saying that in this election, that polling is quite bad for Trump, excuse me, in the suburbs and in a lot of other places he really needs. In 2016, right now, Wasserman was saying, oh man, there's some real bad signs popping up for Hillary Clinton in those districts. So they're seeing some really dire news for Trump. Places where he really cannot lose.
Here's a great tweet. You mentioned Amy Walter.
Excuse me.
Do you have COVID? You keep coughing. You okay? You just have a cigar?
No, I did not. I, for some reason, just started coughing when you called. So.
Oh, it must be me.
I'll take a lozenge.
Amy E. Walter. She tweets, "We talk a lot about what's same and different from 2016. In 2016, the closing weeks were all about FBI reopening Clinton email case. In 2020, this is where we are." And she shares a headline from the Wall Street Journal that reads, "Stocks sell off on rising virus cases."
Yeah.
The stock market is tanking because of a plague, is the headline going into the election.
Right. And there's another thing that I saw today, which is, I think, really makes total sense to me. Trump apparently is starting to get hurt in places where he has just had a rally. Right. So he goes,
well, that's because wherever he just has a rally, he gets hurt because those people get sick.
That's
or they freeze to death.
So there's literally what he thinks of as his big, way to get back in the race is, stepping on his own dick again and again and again now. So this race just has, Democrats down here, I got to tell you, I'm like a therapist for half the people I know in politics these days. But there's not the warning signs there were in 2016. There aren't. Could Trump win? Yes. His chance of winning is about the equivalent of getting a straight flush in a poker game. It's not that high.
I don't know much about poker.
It happens to you very rarely. It's a, 5% chance. That's what his chances are. And, 1 in 20 times. And so, this is not 2016. Trump is the incumbent. Things are going really badly. If it's resembling anything right now, it's resembling 1980. Jimmy Carter lost 11 points in the polls in the last week in 1980. And it was because the Iran-Contra crisis wasn't resolved. And there was no October surprise in his favor at the end. Everything they tried wasn't working. And people in the end, they didn't, love Ronald Reagan. In retrospect, everybody sees Reagan as this natural who came and killed it.
Right.
He didn't. It was a neck and neck race right up until the end. And in the end, what happened? People realized, okay, the Iran-Contra crisis isn't ending. The 70s sucked. The country's not doing well. It's not getting better. And people were just done. And I think that what we're looking at right now certainly resembles that a hell of a lot more than it resembles 2012 with Obama, way more than, Bush in 2004. I mean, I was around in D.C. and spent a lot of time in 2004 around people who worked on the Kerry campaign and people who were raising money and all the rest. You could feel Bush resiliency in that race. You could feel it. In this race, you're not seeing that at all. It feels like Trump is struggling in places he shouldn't struggle at all. He's struggling in Georgia. He's struggling in Texas. He's struggling in North Carolina. He shouldn't. Those should be easy places for him to win.
What are you seeing, if anything, that concerns you? I tweeted earlier. Let me find my tweet because I want you to tear it apart if you think there's anything wrong with it. And there may be. It's just kind of my perception. I always like to warn people, well, that's your perception. It doesn't mean it's accurate. But I wrote, with a week to go and early voting underway in some places for weeks, it would seem like this election is going fairly peacefully with few irregularities. Voters seem to understand the process, and organizations and media have gone a long way to educate people. Do you see it differently? That's what I tweeted.
What I'm seeing right now is that things are going fairly smoothly.
Compared to what we thought up to as late as 2 months ago, there was real panic amongst, election experts about trying to the mail-in voting and the U.S. Postal Service hijinks and what might happen. People might not understand, and the court. The lawsuits that are making it harder for states to vote and collect and count the votes. A lot of that seemed to have gotten sorted out in court by some great organizations. And, but I don't. But is that just my perception? Well,
no, things are smooth right now, and they've been pretty smooth. But here's the thing. The count hasn't started. And it's a theory of mine. It's a theory of some friends of mine that that the Trump people kind of know that they're not in it, and that their last hope, I think, is to get to election day and get just close enough in a place like Pennsylvania that they can challenge the vote. To get within 100,000 votes. I mean, there was a decision today by the Supreme Court not to immediately throw out ballots that came in 3 days after the vote, right? Or election day, excuse me.
Right.
But Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Alito wrote up a sort of addendum to that said, but they could come back and look at it if it changed the results of the election after the fact. Now, think about what that means. That means that they are reserving the right to say, well, Donald Trump won or lost by 70,000 votes. But you know what? We think that changed the election, that those ballots came in late. So we're going to invalidate those 100,000 ballots and he gets Pennsylvania.
So, yeah, I understand.
That's what I'm worried about.
That's one scenario. There's many other scenarios, I think, where it could come down to if it were one state, you could try to say there was a mass issue in that one state. Let's have a recount, et cetera, and let the games begin. But if it's two states, can they play the same game? If it's three states, if it's 400 electoral votes.
No. Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, that's the whole point.
Why is it impossible? Why can't they use the same playbook in every state and challenge the outcome in every state?
Because A, I think you just don't have the lawyers to do it. B, seriously, if they even just do it in Pennsylvania and it changes the results of the election, I hate to sound like one of these people, but that is the sort of recipe where eventually you end up with some civil.
No, I know. I mean, the same as
incredible degree.
I think another outcome could be, Biden wins by 9 million in the popular and still loses the electoral. That also is a recipe for people in the streets. But I don't, I don't see either of those as likely scenarios. I don't see any evidence of it unless, I don't know. What am I missing?
It's the question of tail risk, right? Tail risk in the sense that there's a 5% chance of something awful like that happening. But if something awful like that happens, it breaks the country. That's the problem. The outcome is so bad. And unfortunately, like, I would never have worried about this if, Carter run against Reagan or Bill Clinton run against George Bush. Our problem is that one of our parties has become absolutely and entirely cynical and power hungry and doesn't care about these norms anymore. And so we're really, yes, there is nothing crazy happening yet, but we're really kind of edging up to a precipice. And if it's even perceived as Biden had the election stolen from him, people will decide that, okay, clearly elections are not the answer here. What do we have to do? What is the 55% or 65% of the country that aren't lunatics going to have to do to not have our lives run by these people?
Well, I'm saying I don't think either of any of these scenarios are likely, though. You keep taking me to a dark place, which is not why I called.
Well, okay, got it. Let me put it this way. I'll sum it up by saying this. In normal life, that's a 0% chance. We have about a 1 in 20% of that chance happening Tuesday. And that seems awful high to me. Now, that being said, things are smooth so far. Things are going okay. I can tell you in D.C., we're being warned about potential civil violence on Tuesday or Wednesday. Some buildings are being boarded up again. Security around the White House is now about 3 layers deep. We've got helicopters going by about 4 times more than normal. I mean, people here are super ecstatic for Tuesday because we think we're going to win. We think the good guys are going to take this one. But there's real serious concern that there's going to be incredible riots if the election's stolen by Trump, but also potentially violence by right wingers if he loses.
Yeah,
so it's all still yet to happen.
I'm actually I'm going to go on the record and say I know I'm in the minority here. And I'm probably wrong, but I just don't see the violence coming from these right-wing people who are upset they lost. I think they accept it a lot more than the majority of the country does. And I'll tell you, why?
So?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is stupid. I think I'm wrong. And I think if we had an audience here, they'd all pile on me and they'd probably be right. But the difference to me, honestly, and again, this is my stupid lens, is that the Trump supporter doesn't have nearly as much to lose in their own mind, in their own worst case scenario. They just don't.
Pete, I really...
Their life does not change that much differently if Trump loses. they've been told that. Here's the thing. They always get told that a thing is going to happen that doesn't happen. And they get all fired up about the guns and the socialism and the abortion. But then it doesn't happen. And so I think they're conditioned in kind of a way, up to get lathered up about another great example would be the caravan. Right.
Right.
And so I just don't. On the other side, the anti-Trump side, we see all of the worst case scenarios actually happening. Why am I so wrong?
You're wrong. What you described could be perfectly applied to the poor white guys from the South who didn't own slaves and still fought for the Confederacy. Right. The end of slavery actually was helping them, and they didn't care because a rational comprehension and reaction to their state of life was not part of their calculation. You're a rational guy. You look at it and say, what's so bad about a Biden win for them?
No, I'm not being, but I'm trying to look at it through their point of view. Like, what do they lose? What are they convinced that they will lose to Joe Biden presidency?
Right. And so that's my point. That's exactly what I'm saying. You have you're looking at it and going, okay, let's rationally debate this. Here's the thing. These folks have been getting exactly what they wanted for the last 4 years at minimum. And generally speaking, conservatives are doing pretty well in America for a long time, right? They've been getting tax cuts. They've been getting lots of goodies from the government, and they've gotten more radical, right? And why have they gotten more radical? They've gotten more radical because it's about identity and race. It's not about, and I mean, if you were a rational conservative, you'd look at the ACA and say, okay, it's a Heritage Foundation plan that is actually saving the country money and does a really good thing. I'm a charitable person. Well, this does a great job for poor people and for, by the way, poor white people and middle-class white people in America. It's a conservative position. It's not public. It wasn't, the public option, et cetera. And yet those people were flipping out about the Kenyan socialist who was ruining America and making us all communists, right? They are not rational. This is, again, pessimism about
I understand that they're not rational, but what happened after Obama got elected? There wasn't this. I'm saying if we're talking about violence in the streets.
Right. Well, there's been more, the majority of internal domestic terrorism in the United States, the large majority, and an increasing part of that, and increasing year by year, is white ethnic terrorism in the U.S. That's the vast majority of our terrorism in America now, and it's been going up and up and up. And it amazingly went up during the Trump years when you would assume, hey, they got their guy in the White House. We still have more than we used to. So this is not, again, like you're looking at like a sort of rational construct. A lot of people also look at it like, well, if they're getting politically what they want, why are they getting more violent?
Let me just bringing it back to the motivation, though. It's the Trump supporter and the right has always been motivated by fear, and they do a great job on, from Hannity to Rush to the actual politicians themselves now, to obviously Trump is a master at it. But that's now animating everybody against Trump so much more because I think that, and again, this could be, I'm just spinning around here, but I think that we feel like we have so much genuinely to lose. And I feel like they just don't. I feel like they're not as concerned about Trump losing as we are about Trump being reelected or Biden losing. I don't know if there's any way to quantify such a thing, but I think that's what's animating people to wait in lines. Bill, in New York, I waited for 2 hours today with our friend Dan McDonald, almost 2 hours. Right. And it's like, why? Why are people waiting in line weeks ahead in a state like New York where their vote probably doesn't matter?
I get what you mean. I do. And I think that
down ballot races matter a lot more. And I see people being more motivated by and understanding why judges matter and other, town council and everything like that. But I still feel like.
Here's the thing. I get where you're coming from, and I think that's fair. I think it's right. But at the same time, I think you underestimate that the animating fear and racism that underlays the modern Republican Party. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong. But I think on November 4th, there will have been violence initiated by those folks. In fact, I think you're going to see violence in voting places on Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm hearing
Not
that.
a ton of it. but some of it.
I'm hearing that a lot too, and I don't agree.
The FBI is definitely worried about it. I'll tell you that.
Oh, they have I think people should be worried about it. Yeah. I think people should be vigilant and concerned, and I think a lot of the people that are white supremacists are actually in law enforcement. That's disconcerting to me. That's like the difference between the threat of Al Qaeda and the threat of white supremacists is they're actually the cops, a lot of them. So, I'm concerned about it. I don't think, Bill, people want to go to jail. These guys in Michigan, their lives are destroyed. Right. I think most of those guys that do that, they just want to hang out with their friends on the weekend. And it happens to be around guns and their twisted interpretation of American history and the Constitution and their rights and all of that. But they're not actually going to follow through. Again, I could be the most naive, and one guy gets through and shoots up a mosque or a synagogue or a whatever. And, I'm wrong. I just don't see this massive movement of these guys actually activating themselves on election day or otherwise, because they actually don't want to go to jail. They're really just hanging out on the weekends and screaming as keyboard warriors.
Yeah, I mean, so I got into a bit of a scuffle with a friend of mine on Twitter who's a conservative who get really mad at me because I was talking about Trump saying, Joe's shot. And the initial take on that was that, in the speech that Trump was saying that Joe Biden got shot and Kamala Harris took over. What he probably more meant was like shot as in out of energy, right? But it led to this whole thing where I was trying to explain to him that there is a ton of violent talk that's very dull. And I honestly, personally think Trump uses terms like that on purpose because they have multiple meanings.
I don't know if I don't know if I agree if he does it on purpose. I think I can play it here.
Or maybe, yeah.
All right, so there it is. But
right. So what's interesting about that, and what he does all the time, is you can read that both ways. And do I think that he sits down and twirls his mustache and figures that out ahead of time? No, I think he does it in a sort of feral, natural way. But if you look at what Trump says about like Gretchen Whitmer and about, well, maybe these guys were, wrong, but we'll let the legal process work it out. I mean, who knows? He does lots of that sort of who knows sort of thing. And yes, it's performative. And yes, that I think is reflected in these idiots in Michigan who were thinking about, attacking the governor, and who, by the way, didn't like Trump either for that matter. But what happens in societies where violence really takes off is first, there's a lot of talking about it. If you look at Cambodia before the Khmer Rouge, the language starts getting a lot more violent. It's not an automatic thing that happens.
I know, and I'm the guy screaming about it for 10 years. When we talk about the threat matrix, if we're going to talk about terrorism, it's domestic terrorism is far more dangerous. And I'm not trying to play it down. I just don't see a lot of these, a lot of the violence that others see. I think that it happens at protests. It happens at powder kegs that you can kind of see coming. By the way, I've got my neighbor put up her Trump sign today. What would you do if you were suburban me? You're in DC, and it's not like that.
So
I guess it's like that.
Well, no, we actually, as a practical joke, we're going to put a bunch of Trump signs on a friend of ours' lawn who works on the Hill.
He'll be mortified.
Well, we stopped at the last minute because we thought we could actually lose this guy's job on a joke. So it's a pretty fraught thing going the other direction here. But I personally, I have for election night 2 48-inch tall balloons of Trump in a baby outfit and a diaper, which are going to be trailing off the back of our bikes as we ride down to the White House the next day. I would go. You could get online and find those. They're about 4 inches tall, or 4 feet tall, excuse me, and they're super obnoxious. And
you're saying I should nuke her by putting a inflatable Trump baby on the lawn?
No, I think that Trump in a diaper is incredibly adorable, and you're supporting her political beliefs by infantilizing this so that people don't see his soft side, his soft, sweaty, poop diaper gross side, you know?
Like, as opposed to his non-gross side.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Great analysis, great scenarios, super interesting, good sources. Thank you for your time, as always, Bill B. in D.C.
Thank you. And everybody get the fuck out there and vote.
Yeah,
Jesus.
It's fun. I was with Dan. Dan texted me this morning, and he said, hey, vote date? And I was like, hell yeah. I had my morning open to just be doing editing. Like, I didn't have to. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we waited in line and talked politics the whole time, but very quietly, but, under our masks. And then when we got up to the table, this old lady looks at us and she says, are you two together? And I said, no, I could do a lot better than this guy. He looks like a little leprechaun over here. I go, this jackass, his last name is probably something like some fast food joint or something, this guy. Right. And then the lady goes, okay, well, sir, what's your last name? He goes, McDonald. It was the only time I'd ever be in that situation for that joke.
Have you ever seen a gay bald man dating a bald man? I mean, a gay man with hair? Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, but we had masks and hats on. Masks and hats. It looked like it could be a possible duo. It looked like we were on the same plane.
Nice. Let me ask you one quick question before you go. What is your surprise pick for Election Day? What happens that's going to surprise everybody?
Oh, that's good. I haven't thought about that. What happens that will surprise everybody is, okay, I'll go big and say just how big it is, the win.
Yeah.
It will surprise everybody how big the win will be, so massive that the mandate that comes with it will give Joe Biden, Democrats in general, like a political capital like they haven't seen in a generation. Is that or would you want a specific race?
No, that's fine. I mean, it's picking individual races is.
Amy McGrath beats Mitch McConnell in Kentucky.
Don't pick that one. That's not
I know nobody thinks that's going to happen.
And everyone says Lindsey Graham beats or wins or loses, I should say, in South Carolina. That's not going to happen.
You don't think Lindsey Graham's going to lose to Jamie Harrison?
I don't. I think Harrison's done a great job, but I think that in South Carolina the race got nationalized, and once that happened, and once Republicans dumped enough money in, I think he ekes it out. But I do think this. I think that it's very likely you have a Democratic senator in Kansas. I think Hagar in Texas might pull it out. I think that Mike Espy might pull it out in Mississippi. And it is not out of the realm of possibility that you have two Democratic senators from Georgia.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, it's really, the numbers are really getting there.
Is Hickenlooper going to win in Colorado?
Hickenlooper is going to snooze his way over the finish line by about 8 points.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
He's not going to lose. He's not going to lose. Hickenlooper ran a terrible campaign. He's not a great campaigner.
How dare you?
Gardner is quite good, but it's a tidal wave.
I feel like I don't know any gubernatorial races that are happening.
What are those?
There's no gubernatorial races?
I just don't pay attention at all to any of that. I could give a shit less.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
Yeah.
Real anti.
I only have so much time. There's beer to be drunk. There's,
I remember beer. Been 27 days, 28 days.
Do you want me to send you something?
No, you've never. All you do is send me sophisticated beer that is wasted upon me. I feel horrible when you send me beer. It's like, I can't believe you spent a bunch of money on a thing that I would rather drink horse piss. So good that I don't like it. You know me.
It's okay. It's okay.
So sorry.
All right. Awesome.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Good luck. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right, there goes Bill B. in D.C. Thank you very much, Bill. Give him a follow on Twitter. Always let him know that you enjoy his conversations. Always get a lot of great feedback. He's a good find and a good friend at Bill B. in D.C. on Twitter. And now it's time to get to the great Laura Coates. She is a very good friend of mine who I met when she was a guest on Stand Up with Pete Dominick at SiriusXM. A listener sent me an email saying, my friend Laura Coates has had this amazing legal career, and she now wants to get into media. And I think she'd be a great guest on your show for a wide range of issues because she worked at the Department of Justice. She worked in private practice. She went to Princeton University. She's absolutely brilliant. She's also probably one of the most likable people I've ever met in my life. She has a kind of charisma and a sense of humor and just just unbelievably positive feeling when you're talking to her. And once she became, the first time she was ever on the show, I was like, dude, anytime you want, please come on every week. And then the first opportunity I got, I had her sit in for me and host the show. And she knocked it out of the park. And shortly after that, she got a show on SiriusXM herself when our friend Karen Hunter threw her on the Urban View channel. And she's on there every day, 10 to 12 now. We talked about that show on SiriusXM's Urban View. We also talked about what she's doing at CNN, where she's a legal analyst. She's also an adjunct professor at George Washington University School of Law. And she speaks on these issues of civil rights, social justice, economic empowerment all over the country. She's got 2 little kids. She's married, and she's one of the finest people I've ever met in my life and has been a great friend to me. So it was great to get back in touch and contact, or at least in conversation, because we're always talking text, but back in conversation with Laura Coates right now. Get it.
Let's get it. Because we always miss moments, and you and I are like off.
Yeah, there's our conversation should generally always be recorded.
I know it should be for quality control purposes.
Even our last text message, we should have to read the transcript. A happy anniversary, by the way.
No.
That is not for air.
It was nice.
So I'm glad to hear that. How many years have you guys been together?
This is our 12th year together, almost 10 years married. All right.
How old are the kids now?
13 years, almost 12, 13 years together, almost 10 years married. There you go. They're 6 and 7.
How is it all going for Laura Coates, what with your very impressive, busy media career where there's a lot of demand on your time and then pandemic and kids? How are you all doing it?
Well, I woke up just like this, and, bluebirds were around my forehead, and it was just so easy. I asked Jeeves to get the kids fed before distance learning. Sounds like fun. No, it was great. We all went on a bike ride together. You get it the same way it is for everyone else. We're all going crazy. But you know what? I have to say, I keep looking at the silver lining, Pete, and I keep thinking to myself, before COVID-19 hit, and I'm not at all welcoming this pandemic, of course not. But before it hit, I was that person who was at the bureau for CNN or traveling, and I would sit there and hold up my phone with one arm like this, and I'd have a book that I brought with me, and I'd be reading to the kids for their bedtime stories, or making casseroles and whatever else I could do beforehand to make sure they had mommy's love. And now it went from me saying, gosh, I wish there's more time I could spend with my kids. Now I'm like, did you guys get back into my womb? You're here all the time. What's happening? Like, you're literally there. So I'm going to just welcome this time. I'll probably never get it back when my babies are with me again like this. So apparently I've been on maternity leave for about 24 years. How about you?
I love it.
Oh, way to mom shame me, Pete Dominic. Now ask me the question again. I love it too.
No, because the difference, there's a massive difference for you and I in that you're probably, I'm super busy doing the podcast every day and it takes a lot of hours, but you have all the demands on your career, but your kids, my kids are older. All they do is interrupt me when I'm interviewing you. Like they're doing everything for themselves. Like they don't need me. Your kids are young.
Sorry, I had a price tag I just saw on the bottom of my new thing. My home goods price tag. Let me take that off.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Yes, I do.
Apparently you have time to shop.
Well, every now and then there's a moment when you think to yourself, I really need that. I hear you. And I think to myself, everyone always tells you when you have kids that one day they're not going to want to be around you again, right? One day they're going to look at you and be like, God, are you still here? And so I have been really trying to relish the time. But I got to tell you, there are moments like every other parent, I think to myself, Oh, did you censor me? Did I say the wrong thing just now? Is that what happened?
Talking to me?
Yeah, it's a big beep. You didn't hear it?
No,
I guess the parent police just censored me and said, "Are you sure you want to say that?" Yes, I'm trying to balance the time with my children, and I love that I'm able to be with them more often and all the time. But I really think that they're missing out on a lot from having the school setting. But honestly, I'd rather them have a couple months like this where they're not as social than, having them unhealthy. And so I'll take this trade-off any day of the week, month, or year.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think obviously you have an awesome outlook on it. You realize the nuances of the trade-offs that there are and find a silver lining. I'm still not satisfied with your star. Like, I think that you need to be in prime time on a cable network, on a main network. I think that your style, your credibility, your expertise, and your hard work, like it comes through, and it always has to me. And so my main question just simply is, where are you and what are you doing for everybody listening? You're hosting your show Monday through Friday, 10 to noon on SiriusXM Urban View, right?
Yep, channel 126. It's really exciting.
And then we'll go to next. But just real quick, how is that show developed? How has your 2-hour daily radio show? What's it like? What do you generally? I don't have SiriusXM anymore, obviously. But how is it developed? How would you describe that show? Who's it for?
You know what? It's been really exciting because the show, honestly, is for anyone who cares about politics, pop culture, the law, sports, and anything entertaining that's even remotely entertaining. And that sounds odd to people, thinking, oh, she's a lawyer, she must be talking about the law all day. But I can't think of anything more boring than just talking about the law all day. I think about it in terms of, what are the things that excite me, that intrigue me? What are the intersections? So, for example, on any given day, you'll hear me talking within an hour period from anywhere from something about the World Series to some scene from The Godfather, to how it relates to something in the Oval Office, to a song reference, to how it related to my kids this morning. And it all comes together in a way that everyone becomes sort of a friend in my head. And we have this conversation about the things that people are talking about, but from a different angle. We go into it behind the soundbite. One of the drawbacks of being on television and the windows that you have is that sometimes people want you to unpack the universe and you got 42 seconds to do it, as opposed to you've got this 2-hour block to think about, all right, let's delve into these topics, things that I just read about in some article or some reference that I saw in this movie or show I was just watching or what people are talking about on social media. It's whatever is sort of the hot topics of the day. And then it's really exciting because it went from, I call it sort of the little engine that could show, the idea that people thought, well, who is this sort of strange creature who's always talking about intersections of things? And how are we talking about social justice? And why is she doing a Marlon Brando impersonation? Badly, by the way. But you think to yourself, it all makes sense. And the way that my head, the way we all think about things, nothing is in a vacuum. And this show points that out. And it's been really cool to have, Washington insiders and Hollywood celebrities and great artists and athletes and change makers and musicians and people who come on the show, and you might know them for one thing, but you get to know them for something deeper, what they want to talk about. And that's been really cool. And you know what, Pete? I think I'm actually approaching my 1,000th show, and I can't believe that it's already been happening and that it's evolved the way it is. It's really exciting.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy it's going so well. Can you do Brando real quick for me now?
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding.
I can't believe that voice came out of your face.
And you're thinking, God, that was really awful. But you know what? I'm unmoved by it. I don't really care. It makes me laugh and brings me joy. And I could reference it and bring it. I mean,
it's not awful. It's shocking. Do you have others?
I have many others, but I feel like they have to come up organically. But I do a lot. Like today's show, we were talking about how with E. Jean Carroll, who of course, is the journalist who accused President Trump of committing a sexual assault against her and rape in a department store in the 90s. And it just came out today that the the court said, no, the DOJ cannot stand in for the president as the defendant, so that you can now have to sue the federal government for defamation, knowing full well the feds can't be sued for defamation. The case has to be dismissed. And so today we spent a part of the show talking about the relationship to that, obviously on the serious level and not disregarding the very serious implications of a serious sexual assault, but also thinking about, now, how does this relate to Hunger Games and why DOJ thought it could be the tribute for President Trump? Like, how does that go down? How does that happen? Exactly. Wow. And at the end of it, guess what? It sticks with you. You think, I'll never look at Jennifer Lawrence and the whole tribute thing the same. But you know what? You learned something and you had fun doing it.
That's awesome. And that's an awesome way to become enlightened on a very important, in this case, very serious issue.
Serious. Mm-hmm.
And who has been, I'm going through my list, who has been the guest that you're most nervous to interview or starstruck to be on the air with, or even in the room with? I know you've probably been home most of the time because of, well, not really. Man. I mean, you've been doing this for a few years now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Recently I had a chance to interview one of the exonerated five. And that was one of the... From
Central Park case?
Yes, he's now there. They went from Central Park, 5 to one of the exonerated five. And his name is Raymond Santana. And he was one person I had a chance to interview. And actually it was outside of the context of Sirius, and we were able to replay part of it. And it was talking about what his experience was like. It was shortly after the When They See Us movie came out, and I had a chance to have Blair Underwood on the show, who I completely fangirled about because I love Blair Underwood as an actor, from Broadway to, of course, him on the silver screen. And talking to Raymond Santana was one of the more humbling experiences, because here is somebody who really is sort of my peer. And realizing through the course of the conversation how our personal journeys were intersecting at this moment, but how divergent they were from how we began.
I want to hear that interview.
It was really an incredible one. And I'm going to post part of it on my Instagram at Laura Coates, just to revisit the moment, given this summer of what's been happening. And it's just been something that is stuck with me every day. And he is such a humble and sweet and personable and intelligent young man. And he's, I'm calling him young because if I called him my peer, therefore he has to be young, because I'm not going to say we're old people. And just talking to him about what his life has been like and his advocacy, and the idea of how he has been able to maintain a sense of faith and optimism and purpose in ways that I think many people who endured what he had to endure, along with the other four, never could have done. And I think that was one of those moments of where I was starstruck, in the sense of being completely moved by someone's experience, their journey, their conversation. For me, that was everything.
A lot of people tell me that I remind them of Blair Underwood. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do. And there's a poster of you on my wall. But you also remind me of the guy who I tell you all the time. You know I'm going to say, don't
this
you?
Is not going to be an attractive person.
No, no.
Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
No, he's the husband and the Real Housewives of Potomac, Chris. I think his name is Chris Bassett. I remember I texted you and I was like, Chris. And I was like, Pete, are you on the Real Housewives now? Like,
I got to look that up now.
All of a sudden, what's going on? What's happening here? I thought I met you.
Yes, we haven't talked in a while. She converted. How
you like him?
And so on CNN, I feel like it's hard to keep track of you, but how often are you sitting in for that 11 o'clock? Is it 11 o'clock? No, 10 o'clock hour with
11 o'clock hour. I fill in for Don Lemon, which has been really cool to do. I'm glad he's allowed me to do that, and we've had fun with it. I do it every couple months. I'll be back in November filling in for him periodically. But it really goes according to schedule and how in the news cycle. Is there anything you can tell us that anywhere else that you're appearing, that you're hosting, that you're doing anything? Because I want to know if you can tell us. Well, I mean, I feel like we always talk off the air about things that are in the works, but what can you publicly say about it? Is there anything else you can tell us? I want you on TV every night. Well, thank you. Well, I hope you're going to send over some more mascara, because being on TV every night isn't for free. Yeah.
It's not for your looks. I just think you're really good on TV. I think you should. I think you actually should wear your mask more on TV.
So I don't know how to take that at the moment because I feel like that went from one of those nice compliments to
no, you're not.
You should cover half your face.
No, you're not that pretty, Laura. Come on, you're smart.
You always told me. I remember I first met you. You were like, God, you got a face for radio. You should really do this for the rest of your life. You homely heathen. Those are the exact words, right?
I did. I called you a homely heathen. I remember it right to your face. I was like, listen, you're very smart, but what can we do about your face, you homely heathen? Yes. I feel
like that. I feel like the alliteration is what stuck with me and made me self-conscious from that day out. That's fine.
No, the opposite is true because I'm such a critic of yours because I'm so rooting for you from the beginning that I was watching a clip of you the other night and you're like so polished now on TV down to like the eyebrow lift. I'm like, she's so good now. It's like there's no mistakes. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's nice of you to say, although that's far from the truth. And for those of you listening, when he said eyebrow lift, he means the way I've arched my eyebrow in one of those contemplative modes. I have not done plastic surgery for those people who are trying to hate on me right now.
No.
That's what eyebrow lift meant.
No.
It meant that one little thing. Thank you very much.
It was
no, I'm far from polished. I just, the thing is, I think that one of the things I really enjoyed in terms of, it's funny when you develop, and you know this, when you begin, what people are supposed to be like when they have a certain platform, right? And then all of a sudden you just realize you get older and wiser and think to yourself, I think the person I'm supposed to be is the person I am. And so I try to be my most authentic self, and I'm very, contemplative, and I'm very direct about a number of things. And I try to really use this platform as a form of advocacy. You know what I mean? The idea of, I think that the advocacy comes in from being able to condense complicated things into bite-sized pieces so we all eat. And I don't think that aspects of politics or the law or the Constitution or aspect of the democracy or anything else are supposed to be for just a sort of esoteric elite group of people who want to opine in lecture halls. I think it has to be the everyday person who thinks themselves, I have a voice and I want to understand things and I want to have just that little bit of nugget information that will help me even more. But to answer your question, I always have some things in the work and I'm looking towards more content development. And I think that one way I can bring some of the advocacy and some of the illumination that I strive to perform and create for people in television series and working like that. So we'll have to wait and see what is ultimately there. But I always have things working, and certainly this idea, this time during COVID and not having to travel and have a period of self-reflection of what do I really want to be doing and how can I make sure that I am, being my best, authentic and, helpful self. So stay tuned.
What issues do you feel like you think the most about, and how do you want to talk about them to create that enlightenment that you're talking about as kind of your purpose, that advocacy to bring it into nuggets that we can all understand so that we don't have to be academics or elites to really be engaged. And I think to fight apathy, which you do every day, what are there issues that you care more about covering and talking about because of your experience in government as well as media, much less in the vessel that you've traveled your life in?
The vessel that I've traveled by. I like the way you said that.
Well, it's a holistic way of talking about your experience as Laura Coates in this world.
Well, I like that. I'm going to think about it, carry that with me today. But, for me, the issues, I think about, how biblically they say the period BC AD, right? I think about, for me, before children and after, children. And I've always been very, very invested in matters of social justice and civil rights. I know it seems very odd to people that somebody who is interested in civil rights and social justice could find herself being a federal prosecutor. But to me, I think if you care about having a seat at the table and being a gatekeeper and decision maker, then you have to be at the head of that table oftentimes. And you have to be in the rooms where decisions are being made and not simply taking reactive positions. Prevention is the best cure. And so I always saw my work as a prosecutor as being preventative as much as it was trying to help people secure justice when they have been wronged. And so for me, that's always been a very big, motivator in my life. But I've always been passionate. I was actually looking back to my senior thesis for college. And actually my senior thesis for college was on voting rights for ex-felons and how I viewed it as sort of one of the last vestiges of the policies of what's called Southern redemption. And it's funny because the organizations that I looked to when I was drafting my thesis many years ago now are the very organizations that I look to now and converse with routinely about advocacy for making sure people have a voice in this world, democratically speaking. And so that remains a passion project for me and a passion to try to remove all of the hurdles and access to the polls. And then, of course, that carries on not just during an election year or before an election, because I consider people's participation in democracy a daily thing. How you spend your money, your role in the economy, your role with respect to climate change, your educational systems, the ideas of healthcare. These are things you are daily voting for by trying to hold people accountable, et cetera. And of course, now that I have children, Pete, and we talked about this many times before together, having kids really changes you. And having a daughter and a son, particularly at a time when we are all looking at the treatment of Black and brown young boys and the treatment of children generally in this country as they grow up, what's very consuming for me, and I have to at times practice a great deal of self-care just to shut my mind off at times about it, and the concern and the anxiety is what the world's going to be like for my son and my daughter. I'm only 5'3", and my son is already practically up to that raised eyebrow that you so marvelously described. And so I look at this little boy who's like a Great Dane puppy. He's not in control of all his limbs yet. Every day a glass is broken. He can't stop when he's running. He has to almost hit like a padded wall to stop all of a sudden. And the world sees him as this grown up or adult. And I look at this little boy and I wonder when my daughter and him ask questions about, things like, well, why can't we have toy guns? What did Tamir Rice do wrong? What did Elijah McClain do wrong? I thought he was just singing with music in his ears. Can I not do that? With my daughter asking questions about, Mommy, why do they keep saying that Mamala, she calls her, because she remembers that moment of Kamala Harris saying that. Why would Mamala be the first? I mean, isn't she old enough to have had more people like her and not realizing these moments? And so I have really taken a look at the world through the eyes of my children, and I'm trying to do all that I can to make it better for them.
You're talking about, it sounds like what you're talking about is observing as your kids get older, their innocence being peeled away and crumbling. Yeah. Do you have an instance where that happened for you as a little girl growing up in Minneapolis where you were like, what the fuck is happening in the world? I didn't know that was a thing, because it's sad what you're talking about when your kids realize the I don't know, the real world, a different perspective than the one they've been given in your case in their loving home. Did you came from a very loving, secure home growing up. We've talked about your past, your family, but did you have that kind of moment where you felt that you can look back and go, this is, wow, my eyes are open?
I did grow up in a very loving home and a very strong nuclear family. And I have to say, one of the greatest things that my parents and two older sisters taught me was they really allowed me, as the youngest, they allowed me to see the world without rose-colored glasses. So one of the ways that my parents, and my father in particular, who's a huge movie buff like I am, and a very sort of sentimental, emotionally and passionate person, he would often expose me to difficult scenes in movies or difficult scenes of documentaries, or read me stories that oftentimes would be beyond my years, because I was such an emotional child. I was such a sensitive child, and tears would come very quickly to me. And so what he would do is try to form a bit of a callus, not so that I would have a less of a connection to the world, but one in which I could learn some of the lessons that he knew was ahead of me in the safe space of watching it, to prepare me for when they did come.
Wow.
And so I remember a lot of times learning this, when I realized the epiphanies that it would happen to me. I had in some ways learned the art of empathy through osmosis, to be able to understand how that person dealt with the issue or had to resolve it in their journey. So I certainly have had my fair share in my own life of the epiphanies of the history lessons were not so far away. The history and experience of my mother, of my father, of Black people in this country were not in the distant past for me. And so unfortunately, some of the lessons I had to learn, my kids are now still learning.
Right.
And some of the lessons that my parents had to learn at my age, I'm still now learning, even though I haven't been exposed to it. So, I would say it's sort of it's cyclical, but it's an ongoing lesson of things when my innocence sort of gets lost every now and then when you think about some of the things that are happening. And I would say, to me, the most jarring time of my life of realizing those lessons was as a federal prosecutor, because it's one thing to hear about pain. It's one thing to hear through a news article or a news program about some atrocity that has happened to a child or a grown-up.
Right.
And then we all have the benefit of turning the station. We're like, I can't hear it. I can't take anymore. But for me, those stories have faces. And I remember the expectant eyes that were looking at me to solve it, and knowing full well that justice is not the definitive answer. And oftentimes it's elusive even after a conviction. So there's been a number of moments for me.
How much of you, like, I only talked to you about that, your work at DOJ in like one time, I feel like. And I feel like maybe you wrote about it and you've talked about it a lot, but I feel like I at least haven't heard you talk about what you saw and what you witnessed, which is, of course, what brings you so much credibility on legal issues. Have you talked about the kind of cases that you worked on a lot publicly, written about them?
I have not a lot, but I do have a book coming out, speaking of the some of the things I'm doing on this very issue, and talking about sort of those tensions of being a Black woman as a federal prosecutor, about the experiences I had, and about what I call the battle of allegiance, when you are straddling different worlds. And so that's a forthcoming book coming out next fall, and we'll talk more about that when it happens. But when I have the exact launch date for you, but I've been writing a lot, and it has been very cathartic for me to do so. And it's also one of the reasons we haven't talked a lot about it is because it's a very difficult time to revisit. It's a time when it was very, until I started, I kept a journal the entire time I was there, and would write and about what I was seeing and experiencing and feeling in these moments, right down to some of the conversations I was having, because I needed to get it on paper to understand and see that in my eyes, this was not a hallucination that I was experiencing. And I needed it to be what one quote by Maya Angelou is, just to paraphrase her, there's no greater burden on one's soul than a story left within you untold. And so I have been writing a lot about it, Pete, and exploring that time in my life. And it's been really intriguing and thought-provoking and difficult and emotional to write and revisit those times, because you're always wondering sometimes about wanting to be the change you want to see in this world, and wondering if you were a part of the change or you were complicit, and resolving that.
I'm sorry to hear that you might struggle with that at all. I'm sure you did your best in every instance that you could, knowing you. But without going deep specifically into it, I do have a question about that I've been thinking about asking you for a long time. But just to help people understand what you did, when you worked at Department of Justice, you worked in the Civil Rights Division, and if I remember correctly, you prosecuted people who had done very bad things to kids.
So I started out when I first started out in private practice for a number of years, and then I moved into my calling at the Department of Justice, doing civil rights work in the voting section. And so I prosecuted voting related crimes and suppression activities and voter intimidation and all things related to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, of course. And I was extraordinarily proud with the work I was doing. And really, it was an extension of this passion I'd had when I was, a senior in college, and being able to advocate and work and do the work that made me extraordinarily proud as a contributor to the progress of civil rights in this country. And then I had an opportunity to be in the trial setting more explicitly as a federal prosecutor, as what's called an assistant United States attorney. I would say AUSA for the Washington, D.C. area. And I prosecuted criminals who were involved in everything from violent crime to drug cases to extraordinarily violent assaults. And I also did sexual assault cases, domestic violence. And for a long time, I specialized in crimes against prosecuting crimes against children from ages 0 up to 18. And when I talk about the work I've done, I'm very proud of the prosecutions. I'm very proud of being able to work on behalf of people who deserve so much more, who to be a part of helping them to have some semblance of justice. But it's very difficult to do those cases because there has to be a lot of armor within.
Right.
And you can't let it, you have to, on the one hand, let your heart and mind lead, but you can't let it get to your heart because it can compromise your judgment and objectivity.
Right.
And it also can be, at certain times, very difficult. I remember prosecuting cases before I had children, children who were sexual assault victims, and then and being able to do it not in a detached way. I was always very invested, but then I became a mom and I had a difficult time hearing my own kids cry because my mind would go back to what I thought a cry must have sounded like for that child. And it was very hard to sort of get my mind through that. But at the end of it, I always said to myself, Pete, as emotional and passionate as I was about it, I didn't feel like I had the right to cry. I had the right to honor these victims, these survivors. And I had to do all that I could to make sure that it would be their last tear. And sometimes we had people who were victims in crimes who didn't want to be a part of prosecution. And that's hard in of itself because you're sitting there going, well, honestly, that whole idea of I don't want to press charges, that's a myth on TV. I don't even need a victim to say they want to press charges because we advocated on behalf of the United States. It meant that you might not personally want to prosecute this case, but I've got to make sure there's not another victim who wished somebody had prosecuted this person before, so it didn't happen to them.
Well, the reason why I ask you about the violence and crimes against children specifically, I keep thinking about, like, next time I talk to Laura, I want to ask her this specific question, is because you understand intimately in detail these crimes and everything around them, how do you see this movement, this QAnon movement, and their concern for children and sex crimes against them, seeing as that you saw inside the belly of the actual beast, and they are overwhelmingly supportive of the Trump administration, and so many of them talk about these crimes against children. They call Joe Biden a pedophile, and they think that Trump is their savior. As someone who prosecuted those actual crimes, I specifically wanted to ask you about how you saw that concern for children amongst this movement of conspiracy folk.
I think that people should rightly be concerned about children, but pedophilia is not a political talking point. It's not a punchline, and it should not be used as some sort of political partisan warfare based on conspiracy theories that are unjustified and unfounded. And I think that just like anything that is subsumed and sort of hijacked, people distract from the real victims, they distract from the real issues, and it has a life of its own that's very different and looks little like what people righteously try to prevent. And so I'm always very uncomfortable anytime somebody takes situations that I know are extraordinarily serious and disgusting and harmful. And you got to think a lot of people, the reason they don't describe themselves who have been the victims of sexual assault as survivors, is the reason they do so is because it is a daily, proactive, conscientious decision some days to keep going, to try to live in a world where you know there has been that level of violation. And that's for an adult who feels that, let alone a child who's still processing, who may not have even understood sexuality, who may not have understood genitalia. And now to have it be used as a way of promoting a political or trying to promote a political agenda or disparage another for an election is really disturbing. And I think it has to stop.
So going back to your experience in voting rights, to me, that's the most important issue, or at least it should be for black folks, black voters. And I don't know that it always is, and I'm just white splaining, but we can't talk about all of the other issues, opportunity, fairness, equity, healthcare, jobs, education, if we are restricting the right to vote. And you look at the progress achieved by the civil rights movement of the 60s, Dr. King and John Lewis, you look at the decision made by the Supreme Court in 2010 about voting rights, which gutted the Voting Rights Act. And John Lewis was disgusted, of course, by it. And you look at now the voter suppression across the country. And I'm not sure exactly what the specific question should be to you, Laura, but because you worked on that issue, because you understand that issue, you're probably the best person to speak on what it has done to American democracy and what your concerns certainly are for this election in terms of voter suppression, limiting polls in certain areas of the country, and specifically where black folks are voting. How do you see how much ground was lost as a result of that Supreme Court decision and what states are able to do and how it's going to affect or is affecting this current election?
What a great question, and one that really requires a comprehensive answer that I hope I'm able to give. And that is, if you look at what happened in Supreme Court when they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act essentially had a formula that said, we are aware of the jurisdictions in this country that have acted wrongly toward people of color, in particular Black Americans, who have tried to suppress and intimidate and take away the right to vote and make it such that we, the people, excluded you. So they had to go to the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, voting section in particular, from where I used to work, and they had to get pre-clearance before they made any voting related change, whether it meant that they were going to try to change the polling place location, or they were going to change something about the hours at the polling place, or they were going to reduce the number of polling stations available, or they were going to not have ballots in different languages. Whatever it would be that was a voting related, election related decision, they had to get somebody to pre-clear it. And the role of the Justice Department was to sort of see through the BS and say, oh, really? You're just going to move that location? Because I remember that location you want to move to is a former Klan rally location. So do you think it might have an impact on the voters there? Or, really? You want to do that? You want to advertise something to this particular radio station and the transcript you provided in Spanish actually gives them the wrong election day, which is a week after when it's supposed to be? Come on. Are you serious here? Or as Biden would say, come on, man, right? And so the whole purpose of it was to get the pre-clearance. Now, when they gutted that, they essentially said, look, we're in this sort of post-racial world. I mean, we've got a black president and Barack Obama. So guess what? Why are we taking all these precautions now to try to make sure that systemic racism, I know a buzzword these days, really is still an issue? And of course, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as Justice of the Supreme Court, made the comment, taking away that formula is kind of like putting away your umbrella, to paraphrase her, in the middle of a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. Well, the reason you weren't getting wet is because you had an umbrella up there. So it was extraordinarily impactful when they decided to do away with that formula. Having said that, they didn't say you could never have a new formula. They said, Congress, think of the new formula that you should have. They threw it back to the people who are supposed to make the law. And in doing so, Congress has not chosen, I know there are political reasons they have opted not to, which should not satisfy anyone. They've not created a new formula. Therefore, it leaves it with a blind eye cast towards problems that we know are preventable and inevitable.
Well, hold on. I feel like the House has voted to restore what was gutted, and the Senate refuses to take it up.
Precisely. The political considerations of, say, the GOP-led senators who are saying, you know what, we can act very quickly if we're concerned with, say, one person getting a judicial spot. But if it impacts tens of millions of people, we act really slowly. Our arms and feet are made of cement.
Am I wrong, though, to make this insinuation that for other issues, specifically for black voters or white people who are against racism, you can't vote for a Republican in this day and age until or unless they vote to restore voting rights? It doesn't matter what you think about anything else, any other issue, as long as they are doing whatever they can to restrict your right to vote. How could you possibly cast a vote for them? How can Senator Tim Scott or black Republicans combat that argument alone? Before we get to any other issues, what about the Voting Rights Act and what has been changed to handicap it?
You know, I think people have to consider the idea of voting being essentially the foundation of everything else in our democracy. If you think about we the people, and you don't have a voice in a government of, by, and for you, then you're not really meant to be on the radar. You essentially live off the grid and will be treated as such and disenfranchised and marginalized. I think the problem for people comes in the idea that they are oftentimes susceptible to the buzzwords of things like voter fraud, or what's the big idea if all I'm asking you for is an ID, or what's the big idea if I close a number of polling locations, you should still be able to vote. I'm not doing anything that they think is going to ultimately prevent, just make it that much more difficult. And people have to see suppression as not the actual act of I, a black woman, walk up to a polling place and somebody uses the N-word against me and violently throws me into the back of a van and puts me in a forest 20 miles away and says, you can't vote here. That's sort of that suppression. But suppression is far more subtle, just like racism in America can be far more covert than it is overt, although it's increasingly becoming more overt as we see people coming out of the shadows. People have to recognize that suppression is an umbrella term and it encompasses things like what's happening in Florida. Oh, you know what? The voters decided that people who are formerly incarcerated should be able to vote. But you know what? Guess what? Just doing your time in the prison's not enough. You got to pay your fines. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to have gainful employment with a living wage that allows you to pay the fine. Even if you get that because you're a felon, I'm not going to tell you how much the fine is. And then when someone like Mike Bloomberg comes around, or Desmond Meade of the Florida Council says, look, I'm going to help people restore it, then they say, oh, no, they're trying to condition on who you vote for. Suppression is far more subtle, and people have to recognize what the role of the senators are and state governments in particular in suppressive activity.
3 questions, 1 to lighten the mood, then 2 more serious ones.
Oh, okay.
What is your, if you were on an island and could only have 1 meal and 1 song or album? 1 meal. Just it's a lovely night. Like, you're not going to die. I'm not, this hypothetical isn't like, but it's just like, what would your favorite meal be? And you could only have 1 song to listen to it. You're alone. You're just eating.
I'm going to say my mom's spaghetti and meatballs because it's wonderful. And then my song is going to be, can it be an album of Diana Ross's greatest hits? Because that's what I'll play all day long. Or can it be, that's what I want. I would play Diana all day long.
Okay.
And I would be fine on the island as long as the record worked.
That wasn't part of the question.
Pandemic. I would be fine. Are my kids taken care of? Then you can keep me. Don't come in. Don't bring the first rescue boat. Bring the third or fourth one.
How did I know you would broaden the scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever interviewed, what do you think of, have you ever met Kamala Harris? She's a prosecutor. You understand her background. What is your thought on this woman? Have you met her? Have you interviewed her?
I have met her. I have not interviewed her. I have met her, and we've spoken, and she is lovely, and her smile is very infectious, and I have a bit of a kindred spirit towards her because I think that Black women prosecutors are, there is a sort of a sorority of them, and the idea of how people can oftentimes misconstrue the role of a Black woman prosecutor and her views on social justice. And so I had just a very private moment in speaking with her about it and expressed, that sort of nuance that we both experience in life. And I thought she was lovely. And I thought that she is somebody who certainly is worthy of a lot more respect than people are giving. And I have to say, if the only criticism you can make about her is by trying to mispronounce her name in some ridiculous junior high sophomoric way, then you're probably doing the right things. It's like when you're in school and you're like, fine, Pete. And you go, is that it? I just had like 30 your mama jokes and you said, whatever, Pete.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
The comeback was usually to put me in a headlock after a lot of those jokes. And then I'm like, that means, but I always felt like once you put me in a headlock, you've lost. You don't have any words to take me on. You're not as smart as me. So you're going to beat me up. That's fine with me because I won the verbal battle. And it didn't happen often because I was friends with very big people. Because my dad told me, when you go into any new place, make friends, the biggest kid in class, because you'll most likely be the smallest. And I did everywhere I went. Let me ask you then just...
Great advice, Dad.
Yeah, he's a very smart guy. Let me ask you about Amy Coney Barrett, and then I'll let you go. And I love this conversation. I've learned so much. So she was confirmed last night as we speak. You were tweeting about it. You're talking about it. And I feel like, at least in one of your tweets, I didn't see you talking about it, but you basically were like, let's be patient. Let's reserve judgment on how she might show up and how she might rule on the Supreme Court. Do I have that right? Is that what you're saying?
So, yeah, I have decided this morning, I said, I'm going to take a glass half full, but it's half full. And I'm going to reserve some semblance of judgment, although I don't have to reserve it all, because I think to myself, she has shown us who she is by her prior academic writings, her judicial opinions and philosophies, and this sort of perfunctory role that every Supreme Court justice nominee plays when they're saying, oh, I have no views on that. I will have to wait and see when I actually have the case. And speaking of Senator Harris, it was that moment of, well, do you believe that COVID-19 is infectious? Yes. Do you believe that tobacco causes cancer in cigarettes? Yes. How about climate change? Is it impacting our air and water? That might come up in front of me, so I really can't mention that one. You kind of go, why not just state the obvious? Things like the sky is blue. Laura's forehead is big. It's okay that it is. I mean, things like this, statements like that. And she refused to do so. And so on those moments, when somebody's deliberately cagey and evasive, I have concerns about what you want me not to see. Having said that, she has gone to great lengths to try to say, look, it'd be a dereliction of duty for me to bring my personal views and policies here. I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to follow the law. The problem, and why I say I have to reserve some judgment, is that maybe she'll be a great surprise. There's been other justices who have been surprises to, say, the president who has nominated them, and they turn out to be not the partisan panderer that people thought they would be. On the other hand, here's why the glass can't be full, Pete. The glass can't be full because she's an originalist. And an originalist believes that we don't really want to bring our contemporary notions of life and assign them to the founding fathers' belief system. We want to go by what the founding fathers meant when they wrote the actual Constitution.
Right.
And if you go to there, well, then clearly Amy Coney Barrett, a woman, would never be contemplated to be a Supreme Court justice. Anyone who was not a wealthy landowning white man would never have been contemplated. I would not be sitting here talking to you about my analysis of the law. As a woman, I wouldn't even be 3/5 of a human being. And so let alone how they treated Black Americans and, of course, every other person of color that was not contemplated by the and sexual orientation and everything that wasn't contemplated. So it's hard to be completely benefit of the doubt giving to her. But you know what? 2020 has shown us we can be surprised. So maybe this will be that year of continued surprises.
Do you think that
I won't hold my breath?
Do you think if Joe Biden wins that he should expand the court? Do you think that that's politically? I mean, they're going to spend. My concern about that is, I mean, obviously, I think they should. But my concern about that is it's going to take up so much political capital and there's going to be so much fighting about it that makes other things difficult to get done. But if you don't get that done, then how do you ever pass legislation and promote democracy if you've got this Supreme Court run by, the leaders of Gilead, Handmaid's Tale?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be the first time that a president, that people have looked up to would have changed the composition of the court in terms of the numbers. I mean, Lincoln had more than 9 justices, and there's no requirement in the Constitution that it stay there. But I do agree that there is a lot of political capital that is expended. I think he has the right idea of trying to use the logic of a committee of experts. I know that makes you obviously groan thinking, oh, another committee of experts, great. But having them deal with and grapple with this issue, I would prefer the focus beyond expanding the number of people who are qualified to hold judicial appointments in the other Article III courts, including the federal bench. There are so many people that Mitch McConnell has gotten through in the Senate who have been rated as not qualified by different committees, that has not had experience as being on the bench. And the overwhelming majority, I mean, like 99% of the cases that really impact everybody's lives happen at those federal levels and are not even taken up by the Supreme Court. So we use all of our energy to talk about what 9 people are doing, as opposed to what hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of federal judges who also have lifetime appointments in these lower courts are doing. That will be spinning our wheels in a way we never contemplated. However, I do think that there has to be something done about the idea of talking about maybe the possibility of reexamining this lifetime tenure. And I had Congressman Ro Khanna on my show last week talking about this issue. He proposed a bill about, term limits for Supreme Court or judges.
Of course.
That's in my mind, that makes more sense perhaps than even having reconciled this idea of as Ted Cruz wanted to have an amendment to limit the number of justices. Maybe thinking more creatively outside the box will serve us all better.
Thank you so much for talking to me. What are you doing election night? You working?
I'll be on. Yep, I will be on CNN. Hearing about issues if there's any at the polls. I'll also be with SiriusXM Urban View. Hosting as well for part of the evening and into the wee hours of the morning, along with people like Karen Hunter, and doing and talking to people. For those who don't want to tune in to the TV all day, we'll be on the radio for everyone. And I'll be like everybody else, sitting there sheet caking, overeating,
sheet caking.
I'm not nervous and biting my nails. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
I mean, if it's possible to watch you sheet caking, I would do that. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be televised, but that sounds hilarious. I'm going to be hanging out.
Into that? What's that thing called? ASRM? Was that what it's called?
Oh, listening to it, hearing somebody, the sound.
I don't get that.
I don't either. It's the kids. The kids are all the rage. ASRM, I forget it.
It's something.
I'm going to hang out with listeners. I'm going to hang out on Zoom and just watch, and I get a lot of emotional support from that. I'll be watching you and other people talking about it, and probably I did Sober October, so I'll be drunk from the 3rd to the 5th is the plan.
Why were you sober October?
I don't know. I'm turning 45 on Halloween. And so the end of the month, I turned 45 and I drank too much in the first debate and I didn't like the way it made me feel. And I've just been like drinking a lot at night while I do the podcast. And like, I think the phrase, I've got a problem with drinking, there's a wide spectrum on that. Like I don't, if anything, it makes me sleepy. It's not like I throw a glass at my daughter, but people say that phrase, it means different things.
That was the
Well, what do you hear when someone says, I've got a drinking problem? And you usually hear, oh God, what that sounds like something bad happens, but I just feel like it makes me tired and it's not really that healthy for my body is where I'm at.
It's a depressant, right?
Yeah.
And a depressing year, frankly.
Yeah, it's not necessarily helpful. So maybe I won't start up. I don't know. We'll see.
But how did I not know that your birthday was Halloween?
I work it into most conversations.
I feel like we've never worked this into our conversations. And is that a good or a bad thing to have Halloween? Is every party you ever had as a kid basically a Halloween theme? Are you resentful of that other kids get candy?
You're so empathic. It's unbelievable how thoughtful you are about me and other Halloween babies, thinking that we're not going to get the attention that we deserve for our birthday because it's the greatest night of the year for kids, arguably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the case. Kids would show up if I had a party on Halloween. They would show up in costume. I'm like, it's not a costume party, bro. What are you doing? And then he would just chase us around because he was Dracula and, he made the best of it. But yeah, no, it was good. You get tons of candy and presents. It's a pretty good birthday. It's a pretty good holiday to have your birthday on. And people generally they're more likely to remember your birthday as an adult. So I had it on my notes to work it in. Make sure you mention to Laura that your birthday is coming up.
Are you going to have a costume on? Besides, I'm 45 and I'm Pete.
I love Halloween and I am immature and I love comedy and humor, but I find wearing a costume as an adult to be really weird because if I have a costume and you have a costume, we've just met at a party, it's like it's so awkward. At first, we're like, oh, what are you? Oh, I'm Batman. Oh, what are you? I'm a cowgirl. And then we start talking about economic policy and it just is so weird. I don't like that. I hate that, as a matter of fact. Like any conversation we have is like so weird to be having because you're dressed as a crayon.
Well, it would be odd to have discussions, particularly in the era of Me Too, while people are dressed up in crazy ways and other things. And it's hard to have a conversation about politics that way. But I would say...
Yeah, what's your take? Do you guys dress up?
I dress up every year.
How and do what?
I am going to be Aunt Peggy this year from Hamilton, like Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, because I'm the third daughter. And so I think, your reaction tells you it's a stupid costume, but I'm doing it anyway. I was a werewolf yesterday because I dress up most days of the week up till Halloween for my kids. They get a kick out of it. And I'll be a witch tomorrow, or if, bedtime is past, I'll be a witch tonight. And I'll figure all that out. But I love dressing up. I eat all my kids' Halloween candy. My son has a peanut allergy, but I got to tell you, even if he didn't, I'm taking his Snickers bars. So I love Halloween. I watch Charlie Brown every year.
Oh, I love that. Are you trick-or-treating with the kids or are you not with the COVID? Yes. Yeah, you're going.
Well, we are doing socially distanced.
Yeah, you could just do it safely.
You could go at they have these big fields and you do that. But also I have this I got this huge poster a few weeks ago and I saved the really long tube and I'm going to throw the candy down the tube at the kids. That's what I'm doing. I'm like, why not? On my garage, I'm going to have a movie going, a projector of the Addams Family.
Oh, wow. I asked, you're a real Halloween nut. Do you think, final question, I promise you, do you have any ethical belief, it sounds like you might, about how old is too old to trick-or-treating? I feel like you and I could, if you would dress up and would you go trick-or-treating with me as the ages, as adults, where we're at right now? How do you feel about an adult knocking on your door and saying trick-or-treat?
First of all, of course I would, because I'm 5'3", and people think if I'm in a costume, I look like a kid. So number one, there's no issue. Number two, you obviously change your voice to sound like a child in that evening. So nobody would know that it's us, Pete Dominic. And finally, it's not about the age you trick-or-treat, it's about the time. You cannot come to my door past 8 p.m. That's it. Anyone after 8 p.m. is here with a Chucky doll to kill everyone. So I look at it as there's a clear cutoff. And then my final thing, I know that times are hard, and I'm not knocking people who may not have the financial resources. That's a different category. But if you're some kid who had the option of wearing a costume and you just said, I'm going to come with one of my mom's plastic shopping bags
Jersey.
and a t-shirt and go boo, then I'm like, no, you don't get candy.
I'm with you.
Get candy. No.
Not surprised. We're in full agreement. Laura Coates, thank you so much. Happy Halloween.
Oh, happy almost birthday.
Isn't she the best? That's my friend Laura Coates on Twitter at the Laura Coates. So happy talking to her. And after such a great gig. My wife asked me yesterday if you could be doing anything work-wise, what would it be? And I said I think it'd be what I'm doing with the podcast and what we're building with this community. I absolutely love it. It's a lot. It's every day. And I'm figuring out more efficient ways to use my time and have more time to get outside and be healthy. But up until the campaign, up through the campaign to the election, I really wanted to hit it hard. Maybe Joe Biden wins big. If he does, then maybe I'll take a little bit of time off. But I'll keep posting every day. I love doing it. I appreciate your support that allows me to do it, because while this show is free, it isn't cheap. So please support it with a subscription and go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic to do that right now. And I hope to see you on Friday night at 8 p.m. Friday night, 8 p.m. It's a costume hang. Dress up and join me there for the link. Just sign up as a subscriber for as low as $5. Also, the Discord platform is up and always going. Always lots of folks in there. You can just jump in and chat, voice chat, even video chat on Discord. You got to be a subscriber for that, but it's an awesome community that's growing every day, and it is proof that you're literally never alone. There's always someone in there to chat with and catch up with. Can't sleep? Go to Discord. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. Why do I sound like Borat? I love you. You're not alone. Bye-bye.